Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Frank Speiser, he's CEO at Metafide. We're going to be talking a bit about Bitcoin and what's going on there. I mean, as I'm looking at Bitcoin, I'm seeing it up over 100,000, which is really a big number that we did see it hitting earlier before. What is the runway here, Frank? What are people saying about Bitcoin right now?
I mean, right now, Bitcoin's sort of at a crossroads where, the support level is probably around 97,000, but the top is sort of undetermined. And if it breaks through the 105, 107 level, we could see it go all the way up to, 160, 175 pretty easily, because there's a lot of institutions buying, and, states like New Hampshire just recently passed their strategic reserve that will allow for them to hold Bitcoin. And with other states following, I think you'll see competition for the available Bitcoin in the market. So the top could go much higher.
You know what I've noticed, Frank, is ever since Liberation Day, we've seen the dollar really fall out. I was trying to think of an appropriate way to say that the FCC wouldn't. Yes, the dollar has weakened substantially. And at the same time, we've seen a strengthening of Bitcoin. Now, I'm not insane, right? I'm not going to say this digital currency with absolutely nothing backing it besides the faith that a Reddit group has put into it is going to replace the dollar as a world reserve currency. But it kind of looks like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, Matt, I wouldn't say you're insane at all. And I would say what's backing it is the common belief that people can transact in peace without the permission or without needing to sort of rely on the printing press of a fiat currency. I think that's been the original intent of Bitcoin all along. And you're starting to see that coalesce. I think what we saw over the past week, or maybe the past month, the big Bitcoin asset is up 25% for the past 30 days. I think you're starting to see it return to the point where it's unhinged from the equities markets, and it's no longer moving in tandem with sort of the global equities markets. People are starting to see it as a way to diversify risk away from those markets and away from some really uncertain policies, in terms of like money supply, tariffs, and the like. And
you know what's interesting? I actually was at an ATM the other day, and it has the option to use Bitcoin to pull out money as opposed to using my debit card.
But that's crazy. You don't want to spend Bitcoin, do you? You don't want to spend Bitcoin, do you, Frank? I mean,
it was the wildest thing.
Absolutely
I don't know
not.
if Norah knows this because younger people don't remember, but there was a dude who bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin.
Did he?
10,000. How much money is that worth today, Frank?
A lot.
The last time I checked, it was about $400 million in
My
pizzas. Goodness. So that's a little expensive for my taste. But I would not use Bitcoin. I would not spend it. It's becoming, it's right now, according to its market cap, the 5th largest asset in the world, just ahead of Amazon.
I mean, how are people thinking about Bitcoin right now? I mean, I think that the market is really in an interesting space where tariffs have been in focus. People are really interested about the geopolitics, trade tensions. How exactly does that affect Bitcoin?
Bitcoin allows governments to sort of move money around in a way that as long as they will both accept it on either side. The original intent is you just have 2 parties in a trade. You don't need a third arbiter. So my sense is, and I don't have the data to prove this, but it feels like with the volumes we're seeing in the market, there's people finding innovative ways around sort of the tariff restrictions and controls just by alternative currencies. That could be the case. But I think the world is at a point where it sees it as a valid asset. It's starting to become more certain that it's going to stay there for the long term. And you're starting to develop around that where that wasn't there in previous cycles. So what was there was just speculative belief that it would one day get to where it is now. But I think we're finally at a mature point in the market development where you're seeing people actually build around it and consider it for ways to execute trades, to leverage, different ways around, what the world's throwing at them right now.
I look at on the Bloomberg terminal, CRYP Go, as I'm sure you know, as everyone knows, pulls up a list of cryptocurrencies. But I don't really care about any of them, Frank, not even Ether. I only care about Bitcoin. Why bother with the rest of these? What are there, like 5,000 other cryptocurrencies?
There's quite a few, and I would actually say most of them are junk. And that's coming from somebody who has a company who does crypto-based stuff. It doesn't mean we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. ETH, for instance, is up 11% over the previous day. It's up 40% for the previous 30 days. And what that is an indicator that the DeFi markets, where you're starting to see decentralized finance products pop up, the settlement layer for all of that is ETH. So that's an indicator that the market does want to develop ways to alternatively, move capital around. And you should pay attention to ETH as a barometer for the appetite to develop these types of things.
I just want to say, though, that Frank, talking at the top about how you don't want to be a slave to the fiat currency, right? Bitcoin is proof of work, right? ETH is proof of stake. It seems like it could be swayed by some big holders.
That's correct. ETH is one of those things where the money supply is not definite. I definitely prefer the economics of Bitcoin for sure, and it's a lot more fair to the users. But ETH is one of those things that it's sort of the base layer of decentralized finance, and for that alone, it's sort of worth seeing what people are willing to build for. I think what we need to do to get some more clarity here is to get some regulatory certainty around stable tokens, and if we can do that, we'll start to see the bridge between the traditional finance system and crypto become a little more certain and clear, and the innovation start to ramp up.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
I really do want to dig into what's going on at Citadel. We're going to be joined here by Anna Kaiser, and she's based in Miami. Hope the weather is great there. It's rainy here in New York City. But Citadel is pushing for a 4-year non-compete. In Florida, it's essentially a lobbying spree. 4 years sounds insane to me for a non-compete. I'm really interested to hear what the reception has been and what's really going on here, Anna.
Yeah, so as you said, this is a bill that is in the Florida legislature. It is still waiting to be signed by Governor Ron DeSantis. So that is still pending, but it would allow for non-competes and garden leaves in the state to last for up to 4 years, which is a really long time, as you say. Some of the lawyers and policymakers who I spoke to for the story just described this bill as like very employer friendly. It puts a lot of power with the employer when it comes to non-compete agreements.
I mean, when I think about people and whether or not they'd actually sign a non-compete, I mean, if Citadel is a big name, of course, but do we feel like they have the juice? Do they really have the reputation enough to really get people to be willing to sign this 4-year agreement?
Yeah, I mean, I should note it's up to 4 years, so I guess it's going to be up to them, how long they want to stretch those. I mean, it would be pretty hard for me to imagine doing it. 4 years is a really long time to be out on the sidelines. It could really damage your career. I think it's something that employees there would probably have to think about a lot. In exchange, like you said, it's a big name. They obviously compensate very well.
They pay a ton.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's probably a pretty tough decision that some future employees might have to face.
Yeah, I mean, the devil's in the details, right? If they're paying me enough, and if the 4-year non-compete was gardening leave, on which I would continue to get paid a ton, I probably would want to sign that. But it's not always the case, right? That's what I thought when I initially read your story this morning, Anna. Like, oh, that would be great. Getting full pay for 4 years, hanging out in the Keys, knocking back margaritas all day. But the issue is you don't always get paid on those years that you have to sit out during a non-compete. And even if you do get paid, if it's gardening leave, so-called, you still often don't get your bonuses. And this is an industry in which
bonuses matter.
People make exactly the lion's share of their compensation is in bonuses.
Yeah, exactly. So it sounds like a dream, right? You just get to sit back and be on vacation. But as you say, salaries actually don't make up a huge portion of compensation for a lot of people who work at hedge funds. So, that might help you keep the lights on when you go on a gardening leave, but it's probably going to be a pretty big hit to your income. So it's not quite as sweet of a deal as it appears to be.
So, Anna, the bill has passed the legislature, but it's still awaiting the governor's signature. What's the timeline here? Is it something near term that we could get an answer on this?
Yeah, it's still not on the governor's desk officially. The legislative session ended last week. There are, a flurry of bills to sign. This is one of dozens. So it's hard to say when he would actually sign it. But it would probably be in the coming weeks.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Florida, I'm always thinking about people that are making that migration over to Florida. Great weather. That's what I'm the most jealous of.
But so flat.
This is true.
And it's not like the greatest roads. For me,
it's a no from you?
Yeah, it's like flat, long, straight highways.
Okay. But the palm trees, right?
Yeah, palm trees are good. And like I said, hammocks and mixed beverages. Right. I appreciate that kind of thing. But you've got to deal with Florida man as well. Anna, what is it like living in Florida? I mean, you're surrounded by people that make the news as a joke. Not Ken Griffin, but the rest of the people in Florida. How is it living there?
I mean, it's an amazing place to be a reporter because there is never a dull day. We are always covering all sorts of different things, different characters, different figures, policies, politics. We've got Mar-a-Lago just up the road. It's sort of the center of the Republican Party in so many ways, center of so many ideas that are coming out of the Republican Party. So I will say it's never a dull day.
So talk to me about why Florida specifically with this story, right? I mean, they obviously have a presence in other states as well. So
Citadel.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah. Sorry.
The way that the bill is written, it says that these kinds of non-competes and garden leaves would be applicable for a company where their principal place of business is in Florida. So in theory, that is trying to say that these could extend outside of Florida. Also, this is a very heavily Republican legislature. They do often pass things that are sort of friendly to the business community, I think much more so than in New York. So it's a friendlier environment for something like this to pass.
Well, and Ken Griffin, right? I mean, you mentioned Mar-a-Lago's up the road, and I'm sure that when the president is in the state, he commands the obedience of most people there. But when he's not, Ken Griffin is kind of like the de facto leader, right, of Wall Street South. And he's given so much money, I would imagine, to Republican candidates down there in the state, as well as the governor, Ron DeSantis, that they tend to do what he wants them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's only lived here for 3 years, but he holds an incredible amount of power and influence, and he's very involved in sort of all levels of government. He, donates and supports local candidates and local races here in Miami, state candidates, and is just very involved in politics. He, donates to all of the big charities and philanthropies. So he has a really big presence here and in just 3 years. So I think it's pretty impressive. You see his name on buildings all over Miami and even in Palm Beach too, where he also owns property. So he has a very big presence for a really short amount of time, in my opinion.
And of course, this is a really big bill. What are you hearing from sources about the odds of it passing?
Governor DeSantis usually will pass something that is, business friendly. It didn't have a ton of pushback in the legislature. The bill sponsors really argued that this is very important for Florida's business community, that this is going to attract businesses that have very high paying jobs. Because they're businesses that are dealing with, high-level trade secrets. So they sort of argue that this is actually really important for the business ecosystem in Florida. So in that sense, I think there's, a good chance that the governor would sign it, but he declined to comment for the story. So, we'll just have to see.
All right, Anna, thanks so much. Anna Kaiser, they're reporting to us live from Miami.